Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paverart. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile.
In June of 1925, the New York Yankees first baseman, a gentleman by the name of Wally Pipp, has a headache and he asks out of the lineup. His replacement, a gentleman by the name of Gherig, who goes on to play 2,130 consecutive games, earning him the nickname the Iron Horse, becomes a baseball legend. Welcome to episode 49 of the Hustle or Bust podcast. On this episode, we bring in Brian McNulty, Paverart's plant manager. We talk through his persistence and urgency to come into Paverart, learn the plant manager job, and get us through what we call survival mode. It's a story of developing people from doers into leaders, and that's a challenge that all businesses face, and one that Paverart will need to conquer to get to that next level of growth. Mike, Brian, and myself, we talk about all these issues. We hope you enjoy it, and we hope you pick up a nugget or two. Drop us a line with some feedback.
The purpose of this podcast today is to talk to Brian about his evolution here as an employee of Paverart, where he got started, how he got started, and the responsibilities that he's taken on since he's come here to work with us. So, Mark, you want to start the...
Yeah, well, it's, obviously, how many years has it been, Brian?
Since 2011.
So we're
May of 2011.
We're coming up on 13 or?
years,
Yeah, going on 13.
years.
Well, let's see. So the story doesn't begin at Paverart. What would you consider, was it E.P. Henry, your first big professional job?
First big No, I was actually a jeweler from like 93 to 98. I worked in a jewelry store repairing jewelry.
So retail.
And some retail. It's a small little shop in Delanco, where I'm from. But we serviced like Belden's Jewelers, Macy's, K Jewelers. And
Service? What do you mean by service?
we would go to the malls, pick up their jewelry that needed to be repaired, and bring it back to the shop and repair everything.
So what is jewelry, like a diamond ring gets dislodged, or is that type the...
Yeah. Whatever you could think of for jewelry
That's pretty
repair is what we did.
So you've actually gotten in, so you were involved with the actual repair
Yep.
and repair work. Wow.
So
Didn't know that.
how do you get trained on that?
Well, first you start off in the back room as a polisher, so you have to make all the jewelry nice and shiny and pretty.
Right.
That's going to be fun.
And then slowly you start getting taught how to size rings and do welding of some chain work, welding. And then you start moving into setting diamonds and things like that.
That's pretty cool.
Interesting. Are you built for that kind of thing?
No.
But you had 5 years. That's not a short run.
No, it wasn't a short run. It was convenient to where I lived. We knew the owner, so that was part of the reason. But sitting in the chair in front of a window all day, fixing jewelry, with the sun shining outside, I wanted to be outside. So.
Oh, well, there's our transition. How do you transition from that? Was that the direct transition from the jewelry store to E.P. Henry?
No. First, I went out to Medford. A friend of my dad's had a landscaping business. Did that.
And what did you do on that job?
Cutting grass, leaf removal, and then we started dabbling in pavers with Scott Vasallo, who you know.
Yeah. Give us the day, or give us the year that transition.
Was 98.
Wow.
98,
okay.
99.
Gotcha. Long ago. Okay.
Yeah, and then I went back to jewelry for a little bit because that wasn't great. And then Scott Vasallo called me and said, E.P. Henry's hiring, and this is 2002. And then I went over to E.P. Henry.
Scott was your old boss at the landscaping company?
No, he was a friend.
Oh, okay, got it.
He was a friend that worked for the landscape company. He was a salesman at E.P. Henry.
So an inside guy gave you the lead at
Yeah.
E.P. Henry?
Yep.
And then, so you call them up and?
Went in for an interview. Scott told him I had done some paperwork, which the paperwork we did, it wasn't huge. We had just started doing it. I did a lot of saw cutting back then, so I got pretty good with the saw pretty fast. And Scott got me in because they were hiring for installations at distributors, so displays, and got in on one of those crews, and they put me in as a foreman, which kind of shocked me a little bit because I didn't know that much.
Right.
And,
Did you ever manage people at that time?
No.
Well, we need to set a little bit of a stage here too, because that's why I wanted to know the year. We started Paverart in 2003.
And what year are we in now as your foreman?
2002.
2002
Okay.
is when he started, at E.P. Henry.
Right.
And why I think that's interesting is because 2000 was when, if you want to call it the paver revolution, around 2000, late 90s, early aughts is when the paver revolution began.
So you find interest in the timing relative to Paverart.
Well, and actually the timing relative to
The
how
industry.
pavers in general.
So the
industry
start
started
of the
to evolve.
industry
Exactly.
going to a new level, right? So how do you
he's
become?
He's in on the ground floor with E.P. Henry. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess with the timing of everything.
So how do you become a foreman, a manager of people, without that background? Did
Well,
that surprise you, or?
It's me and one other guy.
Yep.
We're in a truck. We go to, and there's separate crews, and sometimes we'd all meet up and do a job.
Yep.
But the guy I worked with, he knew more than I did, but I don't think the manager liked him too much. So, in fact,
it's kind of important.
I know that he didn't like him that much.
Kind of important.
So, which seemingly is unfair, but they brought me in, gave me the foreman job. He eventually did get a foreman job down the line, and I actually started learning from him. And they start giving you the ICPI manuals and all that stuff, so you have to start reading through that,
Right.
and just learning on the go.
And that ICPI is the trade certification in the industry, right?
Yes.
For installing properly.
Interlocking Concrete Pavement Institute, the kind of the watchdog.
It's the undergraduate degree of saying that you know how to do it according to some third party's standards.
Correct.
So you had to study for that and pass that, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they would make you take the ICPI testing and get you certified, and the walls too. So
It'd be interesting to find out how long the ICPI was before that. When they started offering those courses, because if you've ever looked at the manuals, it's like
It's stout.
it's like a college course. It's like 2 college courses actually. It's very technical, and there's a lot of stuff that you got to learn.
it's not the most fun read either.
Right,
Yeah,
dry.
I've been through it, and I still have my manual, but I got to tell you, it's not that easy a thing to learn. If you're learning it practically, I would imagine, because you were doing the physical work every day,
Yep.
and you were also leading a crew, doing the works, doing the installation work for displays for distributors. And by the way, those displays got to be nice. They got to be beautiful. They got to be perfect. They got to be right, because that's what's being used to sell concrete pavers. And again, this was around the time when all of a sudden everybody wanted concrete pavers.
So businesses, how many people were on your crew you were managing?
Technically, it was just me and one other guy,
Got it.
and then there was a separate group of 2 guys. They were their own thing, and then another group. And sometimes we would, like I said, on bigger jobs, we would all meet up and do one big job together. But most of it was smaller areas, until several years in, like 3 years in. That's when people wanted bigger displays. Big walls,
Right.
big patios, and we did some pretty big patios.
How did the whole concept of the conserve department, how did that evolve?
What is conserve? No one knows
Yeah,
what conserve is.
Exactly, yeah, great question. First of all, define conserve, number one, then number two, how did it evolve into what it became?
Conserve was contractor services, and that was led by Paul Samini, someone else you know. It was basically, I guess, set up to guide installers. Like, these guys were the ones who knew the most, and if you know Paul, he knew the most about paver installation.
Sure.
To help guide guys through how to, from beginning to end, how to build stuff, how to just do everything correctly. So it was like just having a guy there to walk you through everything.
Mm-hmm.
If you needed him to be there all day, he would be there all day. And
Did you troubleshoot? Did you have to? Was that part of what Conserve did? Troubleshoot problem areas
Yeah.
and things like that. Contractor problem situations.
Yeah, so if you're doing a job, you're building a patio and you're getting water coming up from the ground and it's all mushy, and you didn't know what to do, you'd call these guys and, how do I take care of this?
Gotcha. By the way, at the time, all this was evolving. What other competition was out there for E.P. Henry? And I ask this for a very specific reason.
Teco's always been strong,
Mhm.
but
But
they
back
were
then-
a little bit more North Jersey,
Gotcha.
the northeastern part of the United States.
And we're talking now what, like 2005, 2006 when the Conserve
Well,
thing.
yeah, and by that time, E.P. Henry was probably most definitely the biggest name in this area.
Exactly.
Everybody around here knew E.P. Henry through the eastern part of PA, Delaware,
Mhm.
northern Maryland. So E.P. Henry got pretty famous, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
around that time.
They were it for quite a long time. But all this was your evolution of learning what it was like to install, troubleshoot, figure out problems, and this all took place for the most part in that whole Conserve situation. Would you say that was pretty much the case?
Well, I wasn't part of Conserve at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 5 years leading up to conserve, or how many years did you have with E.P. Henry?
I was 2002 to 2008,
It's a good run.
6 years, and I was only in Conserve for a very short bit, and then they made the quality assurance division, and they moved me into that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
That's where you go and deal with homeowners complaining about this or that and the other. What's that fluorescence? Why are my pavers white?
The Sherlock Holmes of concrete pavers. So
Yeah, or contractors who are laying thousands of square feet in a driveway using 12 by 12s. Knowing that they're not supposed to do that, but they do it anyway.
right.
At the time that most of them were doing it on screenings, which ICPI at that point was not having.
Gotcha. They weren't
So.
improving it.
And once they did that, it was just we were the complaint department.
Gotcha. Well then, okay, well that kind of sets the stage. Where did you go from there? You said 2002 to 2008?
And that's when all across the country people were getting laid off. So downturn in the economy, I guess.
Time, Dominic. Oh, this is one. Hey, Juan. How are you? We are going to probably close early, so if you want to stay back home, that's perfectly okay. Oh,
Where's he?
Yeah. So why don't we? Just plan on staying home. Nick is as well. Me, Brian, and Mike are here, but we're gonna close up early because of the snow. Okay. See you Monday, Juan. Thanks.
Right here in Lindenwood,
Bye-bye.
isn't it?
Yeah, he's right down the street.
All right.
Literally
He says he's
right
got
down
white all over the place. All right. Dominic, where were we starting?
the street. 3, 2, 1.
3, 2, 1.
So in 2008, give us a little background on what occurred and how you transitioned out of the E.P. Henry organization.
2008, E.P. Henry, like everyone else, was laying off a bunch of people, and I was one of those layoffs. So I got cut.
Was that because the quality control department was one of the first departments to go? Is that
Oh
how
no!
that-
Well, I skipped a little step. So in 2007, I had an offer from a landscape company to head up one of their installation crews.
Mhm.
So I took that. Wasn't working out. I was basically gone from E.P. Henry for about 2 months.
Gotcha.
Came back to E.P. Henry.
Wow.
So essentially, they said I lost my tenure because of that.
Understood.
But they
So-
took you back.
No. I went back to E.P. Henry. I was working with them for several months, and then the big layoffs started.
Oh, and then you were at the top of the list because
So I lost my tenure.
right. Hindsight's 2020, but was it a good move moving over to that job or
No.
because yeah. But they folded the Conserve Group at some point, didn't they?
Yeah, for the most part, I think it just kind of washed away.
It probably became one or two people who became responsible for doing that kind of work, but
What gave you the itch to move and go to that to lead up the install crew at the landscaper?
There were things going on in the company that weren't quite jiving with everyone, so I just figured, let me give my hand, let me give this a shot and see
Sure.
what happens.
Got it.
That worked out way less than I had anticipated.
Right.
So
now you get laid off at E.P. Henry when they went through their thing, and then what happens there?
I was laid off for almost 2 years.
now that was 2008 to 2010.
No. Well, a minute. 2008 to 2010.
So at the height of the global financial crisis,
Yeah.
right?
So
Everybody was
I was off until then, having a little hiatus from work, which wasn't, it's not glamorous.
Yeah.
Understood. So I went to 2010. I went to a company, another landscape company, the Imperio Brothers.
Yep.
You know who they are. Was supposed to be doing paver install. We did very few paver install jobs. Not that they weren't doing them, but I was putting in fences, planting shrubs, laying sod in lawns, and I was just kind of, I didn't want to do that.
you want to be in build.
I wanted to be part of building pavers and things. Anything related to that, walls, pavers, patios. So I knew about Paverart from E.P. Henry because we put in a few of the smaller 4-foot kits in some of the distributors that we would build the displays for.
In retrospect, and let's clarify that. We did every E.P. Henry show.
We're 5 years in business, 6 years in business at this point.
We started in 03.
So Brian got a little bit of a whiff of us from some hands-on work displays.
I first
And the
met
shows.
him- I first met him when he was outside with a couple of other guys cutting pavers to set for the Pennsauken, where they had mods at the Pennsauken, whatever that was called, Pennsauken something.
Expo Center.
Expo Center, exactly. And that's when I first met you, because you were installing one of our pieces that was gonna be at the entrance. As people walked in, they were gonna be walking through this elaborate, this beautiful patio.
Can I interject some irony here? I asked him about a quote last week from some $100,000 deal. He couldn't remember who the hell it was, but he's recalling back 15 freaking years, 20 years of some cut-in of a display at some trade show that's like,
Did I invite this?
So, I just thought that was somewhat ironic right there. Something that's going to put food on the table for our employees. We're struggling with who the hell called us on that one. But we got the cut in from 2009. That's good. This is good.
The mock shows were
It's
okay.
only, it's not even 7:30.
On a snow day.
The mock shows became a huge thing. Now they started off in this expo center in Pensacola, which was small, but there were still a lot of people who came through
Oh,
that.
sure. Absolutely.
So that's probably why he remembers.
Right.
Well, and that's how I remember meeting you the first time, because you were out there just creating all sorts of havoc and noise and dust.
Yep.
You know, with with those big diamond tip cutters that they had, those saws. At any rate, that's how all that got started, and that's how he met us and got to know us a little bit.
So as you're with this landscaping company, you had a recollection of Paverart. Is that what did you make the first step and try and reach out for an opportunity, or?
Yeah, I called, probably talked to Nick at the time. And I think he remembered who I was, and at that time it was Mike, Mick, and Josh.
Right.
And Mick just said, he's like, we really don't have the room for you. He goes, but if you want, you can come in and see how we do things for a week.
But you called multiple times. Aren't you leaving out like three or four? He would kind of.
No, I think I came in first.
Oh, you did?
And then I started
Got it.
calling on a regular basis.
So we invited you in pretty quick.
He invited me in to see what was going on. I came in, was here for a few days, just getting my hands in there, seeing how things worked. And Mick was like, just give me a call. Give me a call next month. Give me a call, in 4 weeks. Give me a call in 6 weeks. So I did that. I did that a few times. And then I started shortening the 4 weeks into 2 weeks, into a week. And I was just basically stalking at that point.
So how many calls is this?
I couldn't.
More than 5?
Yeah.
I think that's unusual.
I called a bunch of times.
Look, I'll use myself, and I consider myself fairly aggressive. I wouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would have called 6 times. So it's a credit to you. That just is. I think that's unusual. That level of follow up and persistence.
I would agree.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so too. But
So hats off to you there.
What we don't know, I've told you since, but what he didn't know at the time was, every time he called, Mick opens the door to my office and comes in and says, we got to find a way to hire this guy. And
Do you remember how many months?
this was probably over the better part, at least 3, okay, maybe a couple more. I can't remember the specific.
Do you remember, Brian?
I think it was more than 3 months.
Yeah,
It might have been a half a year or
it was
whatever.
over a period of
Right.
time, definitely a reasonable period of time. But at the time,
So what was the issue when Mick would come in? Good guy. He called again. What was your response?
well, my response, well, first of all, Kenny was still involved with the business. Okay, Kenny was still, he was a silent partner, but if you know Kenny wasn't silent. I mean, he was a big part of the decision-making process. And that was from the economic standpoint, from the budget standpoint.
So we don't have the money.
Pretty much, at the time, that was the case. And the other gentleman that was here was doing okay, so.
And there wasn't enough work. You weren't in a need for labor at the time. And there wasn't excess cash, fair?
Could we have used Brian? The answer is yes. It's a question of being able to afford.
Can you
Brian.
afford it? Got it.
Exactly. And
So Mick would pop into your office. This is stuff I knew there was multiple deals here. So it was a function of desire, yes, affordability, no, or capability.
If you know Mick, and Brian knows Mick exceptionally well, he may even, on a different level, know Mick better than me. When Mick comes in and says something like that, you don't take it lightly, because
Right.
he will not stop. He's like a pit bull.
Right.
He's got your arm, and he's not going to let go until he gets what he wants.
Right.
And I think that's part of the reason why this company over the years has become successful.
All right, so we've established that you or I, with our level of grit and determination, probably wouldn't have done the 5 or 6 follow-ups that Brian did, right?
Agreed.
Over to,
Agreed.
let's just say it's a half a year.
Yep.
So, all right, so that's interesting.
Yep.
All right, continue. What brings down the shot, the opportunity? He just relented, I guess?
I guess I just became a royal pain, and finally Mick beat Mike over the head enough. And
well, you know what Mick said? And this is, that's a very good point. But what Mick basically said was, look, there's other things I could be doing here. And
he gave a better case.
Here's another, that's exactly right. And that was a leap for us, okay? But he saw something in Brian that, he felt, look at his background, look what he can do. There's things he can do that we can use here.
Look, there's a learning there too. Mick, and rest in peace, and the company, Mick's the founder of Paverart, for anyone who hasn't connected the dots.
Yeah, exactly.
If Brian made 5 to 6 attempts, that means Mick made 5 to 6 attempts. I'd assume Mick just didn't sit on any information.
No.
He knocked on your door.
No, it's every time, look,
So it wasn't until...
He wanted Brian.
Right.
And every time Brian came in, within minutes after the phone call, there's
It's funny, though, in a small business, I find this intriguing that my guess is Mick probably told you on the first phone call because you knew him, right? So it wasn't a call out of the blue. So even a founder of the company had to get support from both you and Ken unsuccessfully for whatever reason, the money, capability, the workload.
And actually, at that time, it was more so Ken than even me, okay? Because I'm focused on sales.
So you got a guy behind the scenes as a, quote, silent partner that's active with a real voice in the business, right?
Who can say, yes, we're in a position where we can hire this gentleman, and here's what we can afford to pay. And that's basically what the discussions were.
Right.
I think Mike was putting up the block on the whole thing.
Yeah, he could have been. We'll never know.
I don't think his opinion of me was very high.
We'll never know on this one.
On our brief meetings.
First he mocks me, now you mock me. What did I do? What did I do?
You can't remember last week $100,000, but you remember the cutting. I mean, this is just fun.
Well,
this is good stuff.
You know why I couldn't remember last
Long-term,
week?
short-term memory.
I've got so many $100,000 projects that are on my table, I just can't
get to them.
I can't keep them straight anymore. I'm just kidding. At any rate, but we.
So Mick refines the case, and at some point the dam opens up and Brian gets the shot.
Yeah, it's not that revolutionary that the way you're talking about it. It's at one point we basically said, okay, let's bring you in.
Let me say it this way: it's not like we got 5 big jobs that our business changed that we said yes. Nothing really changed from Ask 1 to Ask 6.
That's true.
Correct.
That's true.
So,
the difference was
what did change was the pain in the ass here keeps calling.
Well,
and we know him.
And here's where there was a change. This company went through a sea change in 08 and 09 and 10, 2010, where before the big thrust in our business was the residential market. And then the residential market was no longer there, which was one of the reasons why, your layoff occurred, and it was difficult to find work for everybody at that time. But we all of a sudden we shifted towards municipal work, which are bigger projects, more expensive.
Can I stop you there?
Footage.
A major company, what Brian said, and you've said it, a major industry leader in E.P. Henry had 100% of their business tied up in residential. They were non-diversified across the markets. Global financial crisis hits, and they start doing layoffs. They weren't prepared for it.
Correct.
And with a diversified model to weather that storm. So they lost good people.
Exactly.
And now we were diversified enough to survive it, obviously.
Exactly. Now, one thing we have to understand, and Brian understands this better than anybody, the municipal commercial market for pavers, there's a time lag there. When a residential homeowner wants to buy, they want to do their backyard patio, this is not going to take 3 years to take place. It's going to take place in a month, 2 months, 3 months. So the turnover is much quicker on that. But there's smaller chunks. You get one municipal job, that could be, Lord knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars that could be.
Well, look, but the story of Paverart and the story of Brian's entrance happened over 5, 6 number of times. Our business did not fundamentally change. You had an influence in the background that Brian didn't. You weren't told about Ken, did you?
I knew Ken. I knew Ken was part of the business.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I honestly had never met Ken.
Got it.
Because at the time he wasn't here.
Got it. All right. So over the course of a number of times, Mick said yes, you said yes, you start, and then all right. So talk about that. What does the first 6 months, year look like? What were you doing?
while I got here, I started off with engraving in our little 2x3 by 1.5 foot box. Did the computer, set it up on the computer, set up the engraving on the computer. Did all the weeding, did all the blasting, all the filling. Took that out of Josh's hands so he could concentrate on just doing the work on the water jet.
So let me tell you, an engraved paver is when you walk into a school and you look in the ground, there's a brick, and it says, "Congratulations, John Smith, class of 1997. That's what an engraved paver was, and that's what Brian's describing, all those steps to go through that.
That is correct.
That's where I started. Plus, I started, along with the engraving, I was doing packaging of things on the floor. So Mick and Josh both showed me how to package things correctly. So I did all the packaging and wrapping while Josh did all the cutting and building. I built, I built things too. I mean, one of the first things I built, Mick had a pallet full of parts. I think it was a dolphin. The leaping.
Yeah.
Was it the leaping
That's
dolphin?
pretty cool. You
It may have
remember?
been a leaping dolphin.
Right.
He just had all the parts laid out, and he goes, "Put that together." He gives me a picture and says, "Here you go." He said, "Put that together." No, I think it was the lighthouse. It may have been, well, regardless. He just hands me a picture, says, "Here's all the parts, put it together." And I'm trying to follow the picture and look at the parts, and I think I stumbled through putting a 4-foot kit together.
Right.
I think I stumbled through that for about an hour while Mick's sitting behind the glass. See his shoulders bouncing up. He's giggling. He knows I'm struggling doing it. But
All by design.
all by design.
That's Mick.
So I would help pick up things off the floor, package everything. I would help Josh clear stuff off the table occasionally. And slowly I started to learn how to use the machine. So the first 6 months, I don't think I used the machine hardly
The machine.
at all.
So you were picking up a little bit of assembly and engraving.
Well, yeah, the assembly, I was doing the assembly. I was doing the engraving and little bit of work on the water jet.
What was your impression in the first 6 months relative? Because you got jewelry, you got E.P. Henry, you got landscaping jobs. Your first 6 months here relative to your past experience.
I thought it was great. I was playing with pavers. As odd as it sounds, I enjoyed doing that.
Right.
I was, building things that nobody else was building.
Right.
Every landscape contractor out there was laying pavers. Okay. Doing a herringbone pattern, boring. Doing a eye pattern with 6x9s, boring. We're building pictures. We're making lighthouses, making school logos, making dolphins, whatever else. And I, from the first time I saw it, I thought it was cool.
Yep.
Putting it in for E.P. Henry in one of their displays. But to get my hands on it, I loved it. And I would go home and tell my wife, I'm like, yeah, this is great. I was inside in the winter, which was great because I stay warm.
Right.
I don't like being cold. So in the summer it's pretty brutal, but
Now, it's funny that you talk about that. Jimmy, I remember back in 2019, Jimmy had a similar, this is pretty cool stuff. We still have a video of him washing it. And he's just, Jimmy, he's mumbling, talking through the whole thing. I wish they would buy more of these with the gray granite.
Sure.
And he was just marveling. It looks like he's just talking. It looks kind of like a galaxy space, and he's just going on and on and on about how cool this is. I wish people would buy more of them. But I think what you just described, this is cool shit, and then Jimmy doing that. I've seen, I don't know how many people that we've brought through to try to train, but that is not the norm where they have that reaction. Sometimes, what is your take for new people that come in? Do they have that level of, I want to go home and tell my wife about it?
well, I think it's something they haven't seen before.
That's definitely true. Right.
Especially if they're coming in cold, not ever having seen it. Like John, for instance.
Right. He has nothing to compare it to.
He knows nothing about pavers.
Right.
Jonathan worked in a concrete company. Has he seen pavers? Probably, but no one's ever seen what we do. It was neat to me. That's why I called.
I'm curious, as you go home and you download with Kathy, your wife, what is her reaction?
She was happy that I enjoyed what I was doing.
Right.
You know, plus I had a job.
That kind of helps.
You know, for a couple of years, she was supporting me. So
Right.
And
Well,
as hard as that was, she was always in my corner and still is.
Matters.
well,
Matters huge.
You had a unique, when you were first hired, you had a unique background of experiences, okay? And the most important one was the ones that you got from E.P. Henry. Because if you look at the number of people that work for this business, including myself and my brother and a lot of other people that we've hired since then, most folks don't even know what a concrete paver, they didn't know what a concrete paver was when they started to work here.
Which is okay, because we've got successful people that don't know paver. John's a good example.
Oh, no.
They didn't know
that's-
anything about a paver.
That's the point that I'm
Yeah.
trying to make now,
But you got to, I think,
the assimilation, when Brian came in, the assimilation of him, and, I mean, he was just comfortable with pavers,
Yeah.
just like Mick was,
right.
you know.
You see, the challenge for small business owners, because I've said it a million times, the hardest thing in business as a manager or an owner is to pick talent that you don't know, never met them before, and say, all right, let's pluck them in and see if they're going to be successful. You just don't know, right? So you had a background in pavers and landscape, and so that's all useful. John didn't have any background. John became successful. A lot more people are not successful. So, I always try and figure out what made Brian different, what makes John different. You know, in terms of, is it the paver knowledge? Maybe, but I doubt it, because then how do you explain John, right? So a lot of it's personal. Anyway, it's hard to pinpoint how did Brian, but you said it pretty quickly. You loved it. It's new,
Right.
kind of cool. You love building. That's what you want to do with the landscape company. You didn't do it. So that fit is hard to predict. I mean,
Well, I think part of it is work ethic. I mean, let's be honest. I watched my dad work his whole life in glass factories. He worked for a national cemetery, digging graves,
yep.
taking care of the property. So watching him work hard made me want to work.
That was the example.
Yeah,
And he's got a military background, right?
in a military background.
So that doesn't hurt either.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, I guess that explains partially John.
Sure.
You know, that background, that drive, it's something you have to have.
Well, you nailed it. The work ethic. Yeah, that's the non-starter. If you don't have the work ethic or values of discipline,
And we've seen that recently
we have. It's
Oh, yeah.
with some
yeah,
19-year-olds.
yeah. It's
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
we-
19-year-olds without experience. You'll see it even more.
And it's a major topic of discussion on this podcast, and the whole work ethic concept, we talk about all the time.
I hate to go here, but you don't have a college degree.
No.
Well, I should probably leave it at that, so we don't go on a rant.
Well, we can go on a rant if you want. But the idea here is that this is building what we build. We developed. Brian was part of that, a big part of that. We've developed over the now we're into our 21st year. Nobody built this before. Nobody did this stuff before. We had to develop the processes to efficiently build these pieces and make them affordable to buy for those people that wanted to buy them. So, and Brian was a big part of that.
All right, so you got 6 months of getting acclimated to the business.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you progress beyond that to become a lead guy out there on the floor?
I started getting a little bit more table time. The other employee was having some personal issues, so I had to step in and start doing more work with the water jet. And then I don't remember what year he left.
But there was a crack in the dam that
There was
created an opening.
there was a crack in the dam.
You ever hear of Wally Pipp?
Yeah.
You got to say it. How do you not say it? Wally Pipp was a star first baseman way back in the day for the Yankees. And then one day he decided to take a day off. He was kind of nagging injury or whatever. And then there's this guy that had to come in and replace him. His name was Gherig. And that was all we heard about Wally Pipp. It only takes one.
Well, that's funny. I've never heard of him.
Yeah,
So,
it's a great trivia.
Well, it's interesting.
So you had your Willie Pipp moment.
He had his Willie Pitt moment. One of the things.
There's a lesson there, isn't there? So he got a shot for unfortunate circumstances. You never like to see an employee have personal issues, but when they do, and you get a shot, boy, is that a shot?
I think we should give ourselves a little credit, even if there had not been those issues, with the other employee, we still would have, Brian would still be working.
Yeah, he was demonstrating it.
Yeah, he would have continued to
Well, the other lesson here is it took 6 times for Brian to keep being a pain in the ass, for him to get. What if it took 9 times and on the 8th time he gave up, and then this guy has personal issues, and there is no Brian there?
And
So
inevitably that would have come.
So what I've learned is that there wasn't really anything different on time 6 of Brian being a pain in the ass than time 1.
Right.
It's just he wore you and Ken down a little bit. The business didn't fund him, but he said yeah. You guys said yes at one point. He gets the opportunity,
Yep.
but the other opportunity was the Willie Pipp moment.
Yeah.
Now the Willie Pipp moment happens to all of us, and then the question is, are you good enough to make the most of it? Are you a Lou Gehrig or are you another Willie Pipp?
Well, the interesting part about his job, when you look at his, again, I keep using the same term, but it's a good one, the evolution of coming in here, being in paver terms, a click and drop guy for E.P. Henry, and a problem solver, a troubleshooter, okay? And coming in here, yes, it's a related industry, but it's a related industry that is heavily involved with computers. You have to know you have to be comfortable with a computer.
Well, take us through that. Now you're the guy. You're the operator.
Yeah.
So now what happens?
How did you, were you comfortable with the computer end when Mick started showing you that stuff?
Are we talking about the drawing or just working from the computer?
Well, now you're the lead operator.
Well, in both, because typically you learn how to maneuver the computer, the terminal out by the.
I started fooling down the line. I started fooling around with images on the computer by myself.
Right.
Well,
what was the first step? What got you comfortable with the computer end of this?
Well, I mean, when they're showing you how to cut a field, and I'm going to use the field because grids are easy to set up.
Mm-hmm.
To cut a field that has multiple files. Mick and Josh both walked me through homing one file to the next, to the next, to the next. So as far as doing that on the computer, that it made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So doing all that field work made sense. And and I've told you, Mick says to a lot of people it just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason it did.
How long were you out there as the lead guy before we learned about Mick and his cancer diagnosis?
Like I said, I don't remember when Josh left.
Not very long. I remember. I remember every detail about those days.
So Brian's the lead guy,
Yeah.
and was it more than a year and a half, or?
Well, what happened? Yes, and look, this is not my interview; it's yours. As I recall, and you tell me if I'm wrong or right. As I recall, it's a slow boil. Okay, you're learning every day something new, but it wasn't constricted into a very short period of time, because prior to Mick's diagnosis, and by the way, the diagnosis is defined as his cancer diagnosis, you were in a gradual movement upward in regards to learning all the different parts of the job.
Yeah. I was doing everything on my own out in.
You were fully independent.
At this point, I'm
out on the floor.
Josh is gone. I'm doing everything on the floor. I'm
Gotcha.
doing all the cuts on the table, doing all the engraving, doing all the packaging. I think at some point we may have had Ryan in for a week or two, and then Frank maybe.
So you're
for a
doing
month
all
or two.
kinds of jobs, big jobs, small jobs, on
Yeah,
your own? You're
I'm
fully
doing
independent?
everything. I'm repairing the machine. Josh showed me how to do the seals, the small stuff on repairing the machine. Mick showed me a little bit more of the more involved things with repairing the machine. So I was doing everything out in the shop I was doing. And Mick would come out every once in a while. He would want to fool around on the machine, so he would do stuff.
Sure.
And then his diagnosis was 2014,
I believe so.
Dude,
like
what do you,
early summer.
if both of you had to guess, how long were you the lead operator, fully independent, on your own with Mick before the diagnosis? A year and a half, maybe, or
2 years, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe
so maybe a 2-year thing? Okay, so you had 2 years of independent operations. All right.
With, 2 years with Mick behind me.
That's support.
Mostly laughing. See his shoulders now.
Yeah.
And then
So you earned the trust of Mick, obviously, to be the lead guy, and he's got the luxury now of being in the office with the shoulders bopping up and down,
You
right?
would have been
Yeah.
2 years in with Mick. You get a couple of months, and if you're not cutting it,
All right, so Brian earns his stripes. I'm talking as if you're not in the room. Brian earns his stripes at most a 2-year run as an independent guy, fully capable, and doing some
But-
repair work.
predominantly controlling the floor.
He's a lead guy on the
of
floor,
machine, and
right?
Cutting on the machine, the computer terminal that runs the machine, and all the stuff on the floor, the assembly.
So
the
for
disassembly,
audience
packaging, and all
perspective,
that.
my first 5 years or 5.5 years, it was a grind getting somebody to that point that we can hire. John was really the first one. Kudos to John. Shout out to John Stevenson, where we can see a guy come in, train him, and he'd be a lead operator, kind of like you were in that time. So anyway, so that's not easy, is what I'm saying.
No, it's a very
And
good point.
in my experience, we had, and now we've had multiple guys, by the way, but it took us a while to get to that point with that guy. So you're that guy at this point, and you might have had 2 years before the diagnosis. Do we go into that as the next step? How do we handle that? The adversity of
Yeah, that's
mixed.
good.
Is that the natural
That's
progression?
That's the natural progression. I mean, why don't you talk a little bit about that, because that's.
Pivotal moment.
That's the part, yeah, I mean.
That's the do or die right there.
It's that's when the survival mode starts to kick in, so, yeah.
Do you remember that?
I think you and Mick pulled me into the office to tell me that, to drop that bomb, that Mick was diagnosed with cancer. He was going to be doing treatment, and he basically said, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to be doing treatment. And he said, I'm going to beat this at some point. He said, I'm beating this thing.
That was Mick, yeah.
And
Amazing.
But I'm going to show you how to start doing things on the computer in here, doing what I do, creating files, drawing out the images, creating the files, breaking everything apart. So, he had me come in with when I could spare time from being out in the shop, and he would sit me down next to him, and he would just start fooling around on the computer, he would just be clicking away like he did all day, and show me how to move things, how to create things, how to manipulate the computer to get what you wanted from the image. In other words, how you wanted lines to look, how you wanted to break things apart, how you should set up grids for grid cuts. And I did that not every day, but I would come in a little bit here and there, and I would start fooling around on the computer. I would even do it out in the shop on the computer because we could access the same stuff, or the same program. So I could go out to while he was sitting in the office, I could still be doing the same things out in the shop, not drawing images, but moving things around and setting up things just to practice, which is what I did a lot of.
Your perspective on this? This starts to get into a tough conversation, but do you remember that first meeting?
I sure do. I remember the first meeting, but I think what needs to be emphasized in this particular part of the discussion, and I want him to talk to it, is, yeah, Mick brought you in, but we still have to run the business. In other words, there's the being on the floor part of the business, out in the factory type of part of the business, and then there's being in the office behind the computer, the designing part of the business, the designing cut files and the aesthetic input as to how you're building this particular design. That transition, and this is the part that really was key. That transition, and I saw this every day, that transition for you, what percentage did you learn when Mick was still with us? What was the percentage of the in-the-office design part, the cut file part, the part that has to be done before it can get out to the factory floor part? You know what I mean? What percentage did you think you had learned from him compared to what you know now?
Conservatively, 40% maybe.
Okay, yeah, that's I was gonna say 30, but I didn't.
30 to
you know
40,
better
yeah,
than-
30
you
to
know better than
40%.
me, so.
He showed me the basics.
So less than half of what you know now is what you learned from Mick during that 8-month period when he was still with us. And
Yeah.
actually, it wasn't really even 8 months, because the last 2 months.
Well, yeah, as it got further and further, he was out more
Right.
because the chemo or whatever was taking a toll.
Right. Is
So-
that why you got to 30 to 40 versus like 70 or 80?
Well, no, he showed me the initial 30, 40%, or, 30% probably, just showing me all the different functions on the computers, just showing me basics. And while he was still here on a regular basis, he did give me one project, the dragon and the cat,
To build on your own?
to draw from the beginning, scale it up, put all the line breaks in, and just do everything from beginning to end.
Very complex.
Which was not an easy one. You've
Very
seen a picture
complex
of it.
piece, yeah.
It was not an easy. He again, like he did with me with the 4-foot kit. He hands me the picture and says, "Here you go."
Yep.
I would say it took, if you look at that, it took 2 years of floor work for you to get really comfortable with the flow out in the factory, out on the floor.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, now, on the other side of the wall in the office, you're dealing with an entirely different animal. Yes, you're familiar with the files that Mick would put together for you to build on the floor and build on the.
But you're still the lead guy on the floor, so you're just trying to get a little bit here and
The
there.
only guy on the
Yeah.
floor.
So the reason why you got the 30 to 40 was you're doing it kind of maybe part-time, right?
Exactly.
The transfer with Mick?
Correct. And that's the point that I want to drive home. There's, that transition took place in less than 8 months.
How did you guys as a manager, how did you all come to this plan? Just
Well,
do it on the fly, I guess, right? There was no formal,
Mick and I never spoke about him not kicking this problem that he had. But he knew.
right,
I knew he knew.
sure.
And I knew his wife knew. So it was one of those situations where there was an urgency, but you got to be careful what you say and how you say it.
Sure.
Okay? But
Not many companies go
to
through
Mick's
this.
credit, Mick understood. Mick knew that he needed to know at least enough to do a handoff, and the rest he'd have to learn on his own.
Right.
That other 60% he'd have to learn on his own. And, that brings us to that part where Mick passes away, and, okay,
That you might not have known you had 30%, but you know you didn't have the full thing, right?
Yeah, I knew. I didn't.
You weren't
I
at
didn't-
Mick's level.
I didn't have the capability that Mick had. So I think October, November, December of 2014, he was really there a lot less.
yeah.
So I started to get a lot more time on the computer.
Yep.
Plus having to do everything out on the floor. Turn over to 2015, and I think in January the prognosis was actually getting better
For a bit, yeah.
for a bit, and then a few weeks later it just took a downturn.
Completely plummeted.
Wow.
And,
So February was not a good month,
no,
and then in March is when he died.
he passed, exactly.
So at that point, I'm still fumbling my way through the computer while doing all the shop work. We're at the funeral, come back, and I don't even know if I said this to Mike, but I definitely said it to my wife. I said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I said that to you or not.
I remember the story.
The answer is no. He never said that.
Yeah, I remember this. This was
Well,
one of our first
I
conversations.
clearly remember being at home, and Kathy and I are talking about things, and I just said, I don't know if I can do this. And basically, she goes, well, why not? I said, I don't know what he knows. I don't know how to do what he does. And she goes, well, you kind of have to. So you can either not do it and look for a new job, or do it. So, and I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, but I don't know if I can.
What?
So just slowly started, from that point on, I had no choice. We had to do it.
Right.
So slowly got into a rhythm with engraving, cutting on the machine, building, packaging, doing designs. It was just like this constant circle of me through the whole building. Just doing designs, doing all the cutting, doing all the packaging, doing all the engraving. We may have had a hand every once in a while. Frank would show back up every now and then.
Or Ryan.
A retreaded employee.
I was out there from time to time, but again, my impact was nil. But
So anxiety is the highest, obviously, right
Anxiety
shortly
was
thereafter.
Off the charts, probably. But
Did it reduce slowly, or
well,
when did you get a little swagger to you?
What it did was it forced me to find a rhythm. It forced me to make my job easier, as far as I became more efficient doing everything out in the shop.
Out of necessity.
Like, yeah. And then I had to get more efficient at the computer. So now I'm not the most computer literate person in the world, but slowly I started getting better and better and better and better at the computer.
right.
And then working out in the shop, I think like Wednesdays I would shut down. I wouldn't cut anything, because there'd be 3 or 4 things on the floor. They would have to get packaged.
Wednesdays was the day. That's exactly
Usually
right.
it was Wednesdays.
Yeah, it was usually Wednesdays. I mean, the business director.
Brian, point that up. There you go.
The business sometimes tells you what you're going to do when you're going to do it, but if the rhythm was there that week, Wednesday would be the day, and I remember that distinctly. I absolutely do. There'd be 3 pieces on the floor, and he'd get them up in one day. They'd be gone.
And you're not talking 4-footers. You're various sizes.
There might
Various
be one
sizes.
4-footer, but there's also larger ones, that kind of thing. But then it all got up. It all got picked up. It's.
But let's take a step back here. So you're learning how to be the plant manager, all that 60% that you didn't know, or 70% on a computer. You're now learning it while running it full time on the floor.
Yeah.
You're doing both jobs.
Yeah.
What was done by 2
more-
people
more
is
than
now
bunch. I'm doing all the jobs.
And I could.
and you're also doing engraving at this point, right?
Engraving, packaging, building, cutting.
So one guy doing
Computer.
what is now probably four jobs.
Pretty close. You're pretty close. That's exactly right. So.
But I became efficient, especially on the floor. I mean,
Right. The
loading and unloading the table, I would fly through it. And I'm not trying to pat my own back, but
Look at the numbers. You don't have to. I'll do it for you. So when I came in, and I'm objective as you could be. Although it's hard to hear the story of Mick passing, and I couldn't even imagine the pressure that you two were under, because really it was you two. Well, let me get before I go there on your efficiency, and I'll sing your praises in a minute. But the fact that we're still here says all you need to know, I think.
I think so too.
From your standpoint, how do you process the Mick? And then in March, it was March of 15 or April.
March of 2015.
What goes through your mind as both a co-founder, a general manager of the business, as you're processing this? What's your perspective? He had his talk with Kathy.
Right.
Kathy had very good, clear perspective, and probably saw it cleaner because she's not in it every day. But she knew Brian, obviously, as good as anybody on the planet.
True.
What was your perspective? How did it all work for you?
It was pretty easy for me. All I knew was that he had been trained by Mac. Okay. To what extent, who could say? All I knew was stuff was still being built. He was picking it up. He was, had begun doing the breakdowns on the computer in the office. That's all I saw. Now, at the same time, it's not like I'm sitting back in my chair and going, okay, well, let's see what happens here. I got,
The phone's ringing.
The phone's ringing. There's quotes. There's invoices. Shit's got to get out the door. And we have a sales plan that we have to execute. So my assumption was that he knew what he needed to know.
So you had
I didn't know the 30 or 40% at the time. All I knew was he knew enough. It appeared to me that he knew enough to get orders out the door.
So you had a forward lean that Brian was going to figure it out.
Yeah, and was I concerned and scared? No. I mean, Brian had already proven himself over the previous 2-3 years. That wasn't an issue. The issue was orders. We need orders to build.
The sales pressure.
And that's where my main focus was. And look,
So you got enough to worry
I
about.
didn't have a Kathy moment. Okay.
You didn't?
With Brian. I mean, thank God. That's would you characterize the Kathy moment as look, shoot or get off the pot,
Basically.
Yeah,
exactly.
She summed it up great.
That's exactly right.
It's-
She didn't get that from me.
Yeah, she basically told me, well, yeah, you either have to or you don't.
Yeah, it's binary.
Yeah,
Figure it out or the company goes under.
So that was my perspective on all that. I don't know that anybody else could have done that. Maybe not. Mick was, the thing about Mick was he would not entrust all that responsibility to somebody that he didn't think could do it. And that was enough for me. That's all I needed to know. Then I could do my shit.
You had trust.
Yeah, well, I
Right.
trusted in Mick.
Right.
And, at that point, I've been seeing this man every day for at least 3 years. And stuff was getting done. And every time I went out there, he's busy as hell, okay?
Well, let me build on Brian's point of being efficient. So I come in and I see the numbers and I hear the story and I'm connecting the dots. All right, how did one guy do the office job, the design?
Right.
He's doing that 2.5 days, and I'm just trying to piece it all together and I'm not trying to be perfect with my accuracy, but I'm trying to piece the puzzle together. So I see Brian, all right, 2.5 days. I remember him saying Wednesday was a packaging day.
Sure.
And then I'm thinking, all right, that must mean Thursday and Friday he's cutting or something like that. But he's got 2.5 days of what Mick used to do in 5.
Yep.
And then he's doing $600,000, one man of revenue, all by him. And now we've got a team, we've had at times 4 people, don't come near that. So I say, all right, look, if one man, remember Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I think we went 200, another sports analogy, Wally Pipp, now we got Roger Bannister. No one ever broke a 4-minute mile. Was it 4 or 3?
4.
4. I mean, and what year was that? Do you remember? Mid-70s or 60s?
By the 70s, I thought that was, well, it doesn't matter.
And long story short, no one ever broke the 4-minute mile until Roger Bannister comes along. He breaks it. And then it was like every month or something, or very frequently, that thing's getting broken, and then there was a new standard.
That's exactly right.
So I'm thinking, all right, look, that was the standard, whether we like it or not. We can't ignore the fact that this guy figured it out in 2.5 days and all that. So in my mind, you got to at least try and reach for that in terms of what's possible with the business.
And you know what? That's a great point. There's the one thing, and I'll say this to Brian, the one thing that caused me to have confidence in that side of the wall getting done properly all the time. We interface today. I mean, he and I are talking about stuff almost on a daily basis. Today, after all the stuff that I've learned and all the stuff that he's learned, we still talk about stuff today because I trust his better judgment on a lot of these different issues when we get an inquiry for a project. Paverart is not a rubber stamp type of business. I mean, every project to a certain extent is different than the last project you took an order for.
But let's kind of.
But at the same time, I had to interface with him on a daily basis to ask him questions. Can we build this? What's your recommendation on how I form this sale based on how we're going to build this piece? And this was back in 2015 when he was 40% of the way there.
Right. So he's got
Okay?
2 years leading up to 15, and then from 15 to 18 is when I come in. But you were in this what you've called a million times survival mode.
Exactly.
So Mick passes away. Brian assumes the role
Right.
and starts running the shop, soup to nuts.
Survival mode being defined as not being difficult to get proactive in pushing the sales end, okay, or looking into getting another machine or hiring another guy. You know, when you're in the survival mode, you're more reactive than proactive, okay, and that can only last for a certain period of time. I'm sorry, we can stay alive, okay, but you know, there could be one major problem or a couple of medium problems could put you right out of business.
So your perspective on 15 to 18 survival mode, that period of your life and time here.
Well, it was.
Do you agree with that characterization?
Yeah, I mean, it was hectic. It was nerve-wracking.
Would you say the busy? We were so busy.
Yeah, I was.
You don't think about
You didn't have
it.
time to think about it.
I didn't have time to think about it. I barely sat down. I was constantly moving around and trying to get more efficient at the computer end of it. In the meantime, still having to do all the things out there. And oh, by the way, I think 2015 is when I almost cut my finger off. Wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was.
So I was the only one in the
That
shop
was
at
in the
that
summer
point.
because we were all in.
It's October 1st.
Shorts and yeah, that was bad. That was bad.
So it's just Mike and I, and then that happens. So then we're really in a scramble.
And I go into, okay, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do I tell Brian that, you know, you can only be out for a day or something
Yeah.
stupid like that because, you know, the man just lost the tip of his finger.
Almost.
Almost lost the tip of his finger, you know.
So what goes through you? So how do you keep the wheels on the bus now? You got no redundancy
Well, he came back. He was back in here the next day.
after
No,
cutting the
I
finger
came
off.
back that day. But then I left.
Well,
I left
yeah,
early.
But you left early. But again,
You see-
but he's back in there, you know, punching away. But if it's me, I'm crying the blues for a week because you know my finger hurts, you know, and the
Look, in any objective, anybody with half a brain hearing this story, I don't know how we fucking survive this. There's no reason we should be sitting here right now.
well, look at the end of the look.
That's just an objective.
It all
It
starts with the demand for the product. The demand for the product never wavered. I mean, I think Brian would agree with that too. There was always enough business there.
Right.
You know, and every once in a while we get a labyrinth, which was a
Yeah.
$35,000 job, which Brian hates because of the way we used to have to build.
Yeah,
them
the way we
before.
built them was terrible.
It was terrible. But and then I'd have to kick in. There would, you know, we might not have enough help. You know, we're running into a time crunch. I might have to go out and lay some pavers to, you know, get the thing squared away while he's still cutting another job and the phones ring. It was craziness, but
It was chaos.
it was chaos. But it was chaos that didn't make you think. You're sitting back going, well, we must be doing good. We're busy as shit. You know, we're working ridiculous hours, and and there's a certain camaraderie that you get. But the bottom line is, I'm not at his shoulder every day, nor is he at mine. We're doing our own thing all day long, and it seemed to work. It actually worked out.
It worked if the goal is survival, it worked.
It worked
swimmingly.
A good point. That's a very
So we know from Ken's, our 20th anniversary, Paverart's 20th anniversary, his episode, what it did not work from, it wasn't a investable business that was sustainable.
Exactly.
That's why he left,
Exactly.
to go earn what he's capable of in the marketplace. So it wasn't able to feed multiple families and create redundancy.
In that 3-year period, then we started talks about trying to sell the business.
Right.
Okay, because Ken and Lord's Mick's wife, you know, obviously she became part of the business. They wanted to let's see what we can do about selling this to someone else, and that was the next traumatic part of the process because okay, we've never done that before. As much as Kenny tried, we couldn't find a buyer, but we found a buyer. So it was during that 3-year period before you came on. Well, no, 2 year. Oh, no, because it was a year after Mick passed that the business was sold the first time.
And that was only for a year and a half because I bought it in 18.
And you bought it in 18, exactly. So but all this is going on. He's getting better at his job.
Right.
He's learning more and more. It's only affecting me on those days when I have to interview folks like yourself that were coming in looking to say, should I buy this place or not?
Mm-hmm.
That's when Jeff and Eric got involved initially, the two guys that purchased the business first from us. But again, all Brian needed was time. Isn't that a safe statement to say? I mean, you needed time to pick up all this stuff and just learn and develop what he needed to develop. How much did you go past what Mick taught you and what Mick knew? Because you changed some of the things that Mick did you not?
I didn't change the things he did. I changed the way he did them.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, Mick was, for instance, letters in a text band. Mm-hmm. Mick would just place them and eyeball them to see if they were straight, and that's how he would place everything in.
Sure.
He would cut the bands. He would put the line breaks in not a consistent band piece size.
Okay.
He would do it to where it was convenient to hit a letter or to hit an open space. So I just changed the way he did things.
Gotcha.
So I developed, I guess, my own way of doing text bands, of doing other things.
But through 15 through 18, when I came in, what you started with 30 to 40%, you got up to 90%. I mean, you learned a lot in those 3 years.
Well, I'd say I learned a lot in the first 6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
That was probably your
Because I
biggest
had to.
jump. Right. That was your biggest jump.
Yeah, I mean, the efficiency out in the efficiency of building, packaging, helped me have more time with the computer. And that's what I needed to do. Because if I couldn't get on the computer, we wouldn't have anything to cut.
Right.
Or I wouldn't have anything to cut. And if someone else was here, be it Frank or Ryan or whomever, they wouldn't have anything to cut. So I needed to get things done out in the shop so that I could get better on the computer, so that I could get things done faster on the computer. And the more time I got, the faster, the better I got at it, which should be the way it is for anybody doing something on a regular basis. I would never say that I am at 100% at doing it, but at this point I probably would say 95%.
Right.
I'm sure there are things I don't know how to do.
Well, we got you to the point, or you got to the point of being the best survival mode company that we could have. We still didn't have extra people in the shop for you to play the old Mick Bryan. That never happened until 19 or so, at least in my experience.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about in 2019. That's about right.
And we don't, you really can't get to that next level until you figure out the sales thing, right? So you could be as efficient as you want. And what that would do, by Brian getting to 95%, allows a business like Paverart to be a one-man shop profitably, right? But you're never going to go beyond that. It's never going to be something sustainable.
That's correct.
Because if he got hit by a bus or something happens, God forbid, to Brian, then the company's over. So where I say we shouldn't have made it past 15, probably shouldn't have, because he only got 30%. So, and I'm not going to armchair quarterback how it went down because it all worked. So a great outcome, right? But that's all it becomes, is a profitable small business. Maybe a little not investable, but surviving with a little bit of cash flow.
Yeah, and that's... And
You got to
again,
figure out the sales.
Well, yeah. When the book is written on Paverart, after I'm long gone, I can assure you that one of those chapters is going to have to be addressing this issue because...
Well, we're at it right now. We're writing a story.
The learning experience that we had, if we're passing something along to somebody that's listening to this podcast, sometimes you just have to survive to get to the next big thing.
Well, let's recap the learnings to date on this podcast. So what we went through. So first, number one, persistence. I don't get the Paverart job. Brian does. And why don't I get it? I'm probably following up 2 or 3 times. And that's just me. And I'm pretty freaking aggressive in my career. Mm-hmm. So that's number one that I took away. Number two is the Wally Pipp moment did happen. And that created an opportunity, and he made the most of it. Right?
Exactly.
And then the tragedy hits of the diagnosis. And you did as best as you can given the circumstances. And you two figured it out past April of 15, how to keep the wheels on the bus. And you had, I'm surprised and not surprised that you had complete faith that it would happen because you saw Brian for 2 years.
Well, okay. Well, there's some, look.
And you were too busy to even think about it. You had no choice.
Yeah,
that's what survival mode is.
It has to, like Kathy said, you either got to do it or it's not going to happen. So, and the bottom line is it's not a question of believing that it's going to happen. It's got to fucking happen.
Right.
Okay? And he made it happen.
Right.
So that was my position.
So it's also hard to train. Let's talk a little bit about, let's shift gears a little bit. Now you're in the office 5 days a week, right? And we morphed into that over, I guess, the last 2.5 to 3 years as we get people that are competent by your training. How do you move from this, I'm the lead man on the floor, I'm doing designs 2.5 days a week, hopefully I can get that down to 2 so you can become more efficient. How do you move from that world of the ultra doer of everything to a leader of people and training people? And by the way, the other thing you left off a detail, you got a back problem.
Yeah, well, that's not a problem. It's only a problem for you guys. It's not a problem for me.
We'll talk about it. What would happen with the back problem?
No. Don't give me that.
No, it's a problem for everybody.
You gotta kid me. You gotta be kidding me. It's when you would, that fateful call, Mike, I can't get out of bed. Oh, okay. Well, the shop's down today. Okay.
Look, so I'm doing let me give you a little.
You're right. That was our problem.
So what I'm doing due diligence, do I buy Paverart? Well, it's only freaking Brian out there. What happens to Brian? And then one of the things I did understand before you is, well, the only thing I really worry about is Brian's got a chronic back problem.
That's a great point.
Now,
it's random.
It's not a diagnosed thing, so I don't know necessarily what happens, but it's been happening to me since I was in 8th grade. So.
And describe it.
It hurts.
I would call it paralyzing.
Almost. Well, the first time it happened, I was playing softball after school, little co-ed softball thing that they did in 8th grade, and I hit a bomb. Although it may have looked like a bomb because the person out in center field probably had no athletic prowess at all.
Right. Sounds better to call it a bomb.
Yeah, it was a bomb. So as I'm running, round first, round second, and all of a sudden I just literally just dropped to the ground. And it was like somebody just grabbed the muscles in my back and just squeezed. So I crawled to third base. I should have had a home run, but we'll take a triple. And then from that point on, it was like every few years it would pop back up for a few days.
Gotcha.
Now, as I've gotten older, and once I got into my 40s, it seemed to be a little more frequent. So now, again, it's nothing that's ever been diagnosed, but it doesn't take much. It's just putting on your shoes sometimes. And
it would be debilitating. You'd be on the couch.
Yeah, I mean, everything from your lower back down to the back of your legs just hurts, and you can't stand up straight.
So you're not loading 30-pound plates on a machine in that condition when you're in that.
No, it actually happened once while we were doing that.
Yeah, I remember that day too.
I was up on the machine. Ryan was working with us.
Now I did notice that. So part of changing, and as an owner or a manager, I remember seeing a couple of those episodes, and I wasn't thinking, look, if you're out for 2 days, no big deal. If you can't survive that, then shame on me for buying a company that, but I did know, because we're the same age, although I'm 50, you're 49, I remember having a conversation with you, because it was hard to get you to say, all right, we got to train people. We got to be successful at training people. I got to have you motivated to train people. And I'm like, look, you're going to fucking ruin your career. You got to look at it selfishly, that me wanting you to be in the office 5 days a week and to train people, you're actually going to have a career. Right. If you don't do that, This thing's not going to get better over time. You would think it's going to get worse. And what used to be 8 months is going to turn into 4-month intervals. Then it'll be 2 months, and it can be a problem. So in a physical world, blue-collar trades, you've got to want to train people, or else this is going to happen. What's odd is this softball, so this is kind of a random type of thing, but it doesn't get better with physical activity, I would think, right?
No, it doesn't make any sense why it happened in the first place.
Right.
I think 8th grade, you got to be in good physical condition for a kid.
But now let me give you my perspective. The world of leadership and management and training people and the psychology and all the bullshit they got to deal with leading people and training people and motivating them, that is a completely different skill set than what you described, 5 days of two in a computer, doing all the work versus leading the work. Those are completely different muscles in your body. You agree?
Agreed. Absolutely.
Well, and we had people in here, we had people over the years come through that I would have to train anyway, like AJ.
Sure.
Frank, even though Frank kind of knew, teaching how to do the fields was always the sticking point for everyone. So I mean, getting people in to train them was always a good option. I mean, I like the physical work. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm. Which is great.
But I don't mind sitting on the computer doing it. I really enjoy doing the images on the computer, like new things. I can build compass roses on the computer in my sleep, but new things like new logos, high school logos, college logos, things like that, things that we haven't seen before or done before. That I really like doing.
I'll relay a quick story here.
I don't mind the physical work, but I like the computer work.
I'll relay a quick story here. You didn't always like sitting in front of a computer, and I know this for a fact because when he first started doing it, when you get involved with that, I mean, he would sit in front of that computer for hours, and I marveled at that because you're dealing with little blue lines and little vector points and all this. I mean, it's got to drive your eyes crazy. Well, when he was initially starting to do that, that was the comment that I got from him one day. I'll never forget that. I was going through the office. He says, "I got to take a break." Well, what's the problem? I've been sitting in front of this computer for 3 hours, and my eyes are going. It's craziness. So he would take a break, go out in the shop, and work in the shop. And that's not the case anymore. He can sit behind a computer for 8 hours now, and just and I guess you adapt. You get used to that kind of stuff.
Or
And then
take a nap or whatever.
Yeah, he likes doing it. But I'll never forget that. So, my God, it's 3 hours, and I can't stand this anymore. It's driving me nuts.
Well, when you're used to moving that much,
That's
when
right.
you're used to constantly moving.
The trap you can fall into is being behind a computer for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get up and go and
Exactly.
do stuff.
Right.
I mean, I don't get to play on the tables much anymore. But
Which is good. The challenge is we've already established, the team is probably pissed off every time I bring it up, but I bring it up. I'm not shy about it. It's kind of like drunk driving. Once you have an incident, your insurance is up for 7 years because they're like, they don't give you off the hook. That lives with you. So the story of Brian and doing 3 jobs and the $600,000 of revenue, one man, designs, and the shop. That's a folklore of the company. It doesn't go away because as we bring new people in and we hear about we need more labor, we need more. Hold on a minute. We got a leader. We have the example. Now, I don't expect people to get to that level, but we know what a machine and one guy on one day is worth. Now, it's up to us as leaders to say, all right, that's the standard. They don't got to hit that, but you can't be a quarter of that.
Right.
And we call that success. We won't be able to run a profit. We would be better off in survival mode with 2 people if we can't get to somewhere close to what Brian's already demonstrated. Trick as a leader, with your experience, is to translate that as you're training people and to have an eye on it without doing the physical work so you don't ruin your back, and we're inspiring new people to get there. And I think we're pretty darn close.
Yeah, and it's that transition from survival to growth mode that we've been in now for the last 5 years. look, we don't get to the growth mode unless we survive.
Right.
And that we did.
Right.
So
You got to live to see another day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's, it could have just as easily gone the other way.
I would say, though, would Brian learned the job in 2 years being a lead operator, mastered that job, and you're getting a 90%, and you don't agree, or?
Yeah, they didn't master it in 2 years.
But you got pretty darn close. Is there a job that you weren't able to do?
No, but I still make mistakes.
Well, we all do. I make mistakes on simple shit every day. But in terms of being able to do any job, you can lead and cut and assemble and package any job
Yeah.
in 2 years. So you mastered that job from a functional, always learning though, always making mistakes. That's part of it. The design work took longer probably, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? I would say, all right, so that's a physical, technical, doing type job, and 2 years for lead operator. And let's just say it's 4 or 5 years for design, plant manager. The leadership thing is, the learning curve on that is 5 times longer than that. It really is.
Absolutely.
The human aspect of leading and motivating and training people, a lot hard. That's the hardest job you have.
Yeah.
Look, I'm 50 years old in business for 35 fucking years. By far, it's the hardest. And I'm not, like you used to think you were 20 or 30 to 40% on the leadership thing. I'm beyond that. But I don't know if I'm past 50, 60%. I'm kind of in that 60% range.
Right.
It's 5.5 years, and we just had our first team meeting last May of 2023. And I'm 5 years into this. Now, I got all the excuses in the world. That ain't exactly a great scorecard in leadership and the people area of the business.
Is it safe to say the difference is the difference between learning and executing processes and learning and dealing with people?
It's harder. I mean,
Much harder.
It's
That's what leadership's all
think
about.
about the topics to lead people. You need to be able to set standards. So that set standards, you gotta relate your old technical doing thing to say, I know this thing should take 4 hours, and I'm gonna hold people accountable. And these are people that you want to like you. So you got to get this. You got this buddy and separation thing. You're moving from being one of the guys to now a leader of the guys. Right. And how do you be a leader? Well, you got to know a standard and you got to know if they hit it. I'm telling you, it's taken me 30. That's not an easy thing to do. So whatever the learning curve is to do design, let's just say it's 3 years. Quadruple that for being a leader of people, and that's hard.
Well, that's, I think, part of being a leader of people is you got to have balls. You have to be able to. You cannot be afraid to correct somebody that's your friend or somebody that you know very well that you work with. And by the way, we're 9 guys now. At one point we were 2.
Right.
Okay. So
Well, the other
there's 7 other guys that are involved with this now that have to be, they're involved
well, having
in
balls
the
is
day-to-day decisions.
is a critical one. Being able to spot talent to make life easier for you. If you got a right hand or a right hand and a half, that makes the journey a lot. You've got to be able to pull people in. The more you can pull people in, like you're doing now with Jimmy, right? And you've done that with John as well.
It's the difference between
You gotta
where
be able
we
to
are today and where we were 5 years, just 5 years ago. It's staggeringly different. And the first component that changed was the personnel component. And the argument can be made that's probably the first component that has to change.
Yeah, look, the only regrets I've ever had in business in this whole area of leadership is not moving fast enough. I kicked myself from last year from not moving Jonathan in September,
Right.
and not putting Jimmy with you on design quicker. Now, geez, he only started last May, but you can't wait for cancer to start training people.
Yeah.
You really can't. You've got to invest. So the investment comes from, here's a guy, whoever it is, they're doing a task. You got to say, they're going to stop that task for 15 hours a week, and I'm going to put them behind our best guy and mold them for the future. And because if you don't do that, you're never going to freaking grow. So
I'm going to put that on a T-shirt.
now we can call that cross training. What's that?
You can't wait for cancer.
Yeah, and that, look, that's
That
hard.
actually sums up a lot of what we're talking about and Brian's success with this business. You can't wait for cancer. One could say we got lucky.
We were lucky. That's why I said, why is Paverart here? Well, Brian happened to be fucking good enough.
Yeah.
That's really all. And Kathy gave me, he had some urgency,
Right.
and he was persistent, and the Wally Pipp moment. So there's all these things, not just one thing. That is the story of Brian McNulty Paverart.
Understood, but the bottom
But the
line
question is, how do we get to $10 million? Because now we've proven we can get beyond survival mode,
Right.
and now we're that next level of success. The next can't wait for cancer moment is, how do we inspire the next Brian or the next Bryans?
Or the next Mike.
and the next Mike,
Yeah.
and who's going to be the future owner, whenever that is, 15 years of Paverart.
Right, exactly.
Can we enlist enough people to want to step into that shoe, whatever the shoe is?
Yeah.
And that's where it's hard. There's no book. Look, I got a management degree. The reason why I ask you about your degree, I don't think it fucking means anything.
I don't have one.
Yeah, you don't have one. I do, and it was management and communications and all this fancy shit.
Right.
And I'm telling you, I'm at 60% where I need to be as a leader. And I might be generous with that, giving myself a lot of credit that I don't deserve. But what I do know is if you don't have someone inspired pre-cancer or pre-urgency, we don't go fucking anywhere. And the regret that I have is not moving quicker with developing people. But look, that's the past. The only thing we can change is today and tomorrow. Going forward, what do we do with our people?
We've talked about this, and we don't want to sacrifice a future podcast by talking about that now, because we can talk about that's a whole other podcast.
But the challenge is Brian, who has demonstrated ultimate doer and learning capability.
Right.
The leadership thing is the next evolution, and that's where the game is won in the future to get to the next level.
It's necessary. It's absolutely 100% necessary. So, well,
What did we miss in your journey up to this point that we haven't covered that's relevant to dive into?
I don't think we've missed much of anything.
no, we talked about the spouse.
Spouse has a
Talked
role.
about
We
missing
talked about
fingers,
survival move. Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked about crushing a pinky.
bad backs.
Bad backs. We talked about all the relevant stuff.
Obviously, your loyalty to Brian is off the charts because you've been through all of this.
Well, that's because in the beginning he wasn't. He didn't care.
Right? He said no 6 times.
He said no 6 times. He said, I don't want to hire this clown. Please, Mick, no.
Oh my God! It's it. Well, anyway, yes. You don't go through the wars and not develop a relationship. It's not. It's not overt, but you can't go through the wars like that and not look back on it and say, Jesus, it was just him and me, and nobody else knew that except maybe my brother, and he understood because he was here when we first started the business, and he was here for 3-4 years before he became the non-silent partner.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Look, your brother told a story of, and again, like Brian's not going to brag on himself. I'll brag on Ken is a COO of one of the most successful publicly traded companies in America, and he was a co-founder of Paverart. So Paverart had this unfair advantage of you, Ken,
Unfair.
and Mick. I mean, it was great, unusual talent to start a company, and that's part of the reason why we survived as long as we did. And then all the story we told with Brian here, right? But he pitched 15 venture capitalists on growth capital coming into the business to build out a staff, and all 15 said no. So, and this is Ken. This is not Alavita. I'm not on the league of Ken, and he got told no 15 times, right? So that's pretty freaking humbling that 15 pitched by Ken said no. So we got one hell of a story of there's a lot of people that think we shouldn't be here. And I love that. Talk about a chip on the shoulder that all these people said we shouldn't be here. That if anybody were to say, all right, April 15, Mick's going to pass away, we've got a guy that might take it, the odds every step of the way we shouldn't have made it.
Right. No, that's absolutely right.
That's pretty freaking cool.
And
Can we get to the next level? Well, that's how freaking good are we? Can we learn leadership? Can I get to 70%?
look, at the end of the day, I'm not a rah-rah guy, but I can get into that mode very easily. Can we get to the next level? Of course we can get to the next level. Is it going to require the same type of intestinal fortitude that it took to get us out of survival mode and get us into growth mode? Yeah, maybe even a little bit more. But we've got experience and background in this area. We should be able to do this.
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that what got us to this point, we need a whole different level of skill and growth to get to the next level.
We do.
So we can get there. We got the team.
We do, but we had to learn along the way, and we learned along the way. So I've never, that same mode where, okay, Brian will do this. I got shit to do. Brian will figure this out.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Okay. It worked then, but that level of confidence and that level of experience and background is probably what we're going to need to get to the next level.
We got a 20, how old is Jonathan, 27?
Yeah, 27.
We got a 27-year-old, born in the U.S., but spent more time in El Salvador, comes here and did a good job learning the floor, I think, in 9 months. He learned a lot out there. I don't know if he was at your level in 9 months, but he did pretty good. pull him in the office, and look, the question's going to be, and we're investing a lot in him, and he's a smart kid. He's got motivation. He's young. Is he going to be able to sell anything? Well, we're going to have to figure that out. We're going to have to coach him to get there, and at some point he's going to have to produce results, and then we're going to have to figure out what's next for him.
He's being coached.
So it's all of these things have to happen, and they got to happen pre-urgency, pre-life or death type of thing.
Sure.
So
It's pretty cool. The lesson to be learned is you don't sit on your hands. I can hit you with 5 cliches right now. Don't let any grass grow under your feet and all that bullshit.
Yeah,
I've heard that one before. That must be a 1920s one.
Thank you. Yeah, here we go. By the way, I'm getting real tired of taking all the shots. I'm just kidding. But
look, it's a great story of, in the we don't talk a lot about Paverart per se, because we're more geared towards helping other small businesses.
Yeah, but it's the story.
It's the basis
that
of
pushes the idea of small business and entrepreneurial spirit and what you've got to do to get to the next level. It's an excellent example of what needs to be done, and there's been some success there with Paverart.
Yeah,
So
look.
Why not talk about it?
Yeah,
we're not talking about it to sell it. We're talking about it as an example.
That's right.
Okay. So I think it's.
What the title? Now the question is, what's the title of the episode? I think Wally Pipp has a role, or the quip on urgency. But there's a lot of things.
Wait.
Wally Pipp. You don't know when your opportunity is going to come in life and what
Right.
presents it. And when the guy had the personal issues and you stepped up and became a lead operator,
Right.
if you weren't great. And then developing, I mean, who knows where it goes? Look, it goes way back to if you don't make that second phone call and the third and the fourth, who knows what the hell happens?
Yeah.
And you can't rewrite history, but
We weren't we didn't have sayings back in that day, back in the survival mode. We want to be here 6 months from now.
Right.
We didn't have that.
Right.
We couldn't afford to say that. We didn't need to.
So tell that story real quick.
Well, the idea here was we had an employee issue here, which Brian knows what I'm talking about. Brian knows exactly what I'm talking about. He's been here the whole time. But this was about a year into your ownership and tenure with the business, and it was just every day we're dealing with employee issues, and it's hours every day you're dealing with this stuff, and there's just so many other things that we want to do that we have to do to grow the business. And during a meeting one day, I'd had enough. I'd reached my boiling point. And I said, in regards to a decision we were going to need to make in regards to a particular employee or 2 employees, do we want to be here 6 months from now? And that was the question. That's the question that was posed. And we both, you and I, Mark and I, came to the conclusion, no.
And let's work to
We don't
create
want
a
to be
better
here 6
scenario.
months from
Right.
now. And that, forget the words. We would have gotten there anyway, I think. But that seemed to mark the time where we all of a sudden jumped from where we were into, we're not putting up with this bullshit anymore. And that's, we led the charge with that, and it's made all the difference in the world. It got us to the next 3 levels of sales that we wanted to get to, and
You've almost got to force that question every 6 months as a business owner.
Yeah.
To say, what is the topic you're really struggling with? You're over-resourcing. You're spending too much time talking about trying to figure out.
Absolutely.
You got to ask that question and say, all right, how do we get beyond this?
No question.
This issue, whatever that issue is.
And if I hadn't said it, you would have said it in some other way. We're not doing this anymore. Whatever the saying was, but it seems to have been that point. That was the Waterloo. We said from here on in, we're doing things.
Yeah, look, every business is going to come back to people, and it's the urgency of training people. It's the urgency of leading people to try and inspire to grow. You can't have everybody that wants to grow personally. You just have freaking chaos. I mean, you can, but you got to be able to say, here's where we got to get to. And you're doing it. Everybody wins in a company that grows and becomes a little stronger. They really do. Does it create stress and change? Yeah, it does.
Well,
What's the alternative? Survival mode.
Well, it's the stress and change comes from the fact that you're doing that 364 days a year. The 365th day is when you get your bonus, okay? And that lasts for about 24 hours, okay? That feeling lasts for 24 hours, but it took you 364 days to get to that day. Nobody ever talks about that. It takes that amount of time to get there. But once you get there, if you've done everything that you needed to do and you dealt with all the stressful moments of what it takes to grow a business, you get to enjoy that 365th day, and that's important.
Well, and then you got a new year because you're a stronger company. You got a more resilient,
Absolutely.
all those things.
Your baseline has grown. It's risen. So, but
Well, look,
again, we're getting into another podcast.
Yeah,
now.
we're waxing poetic. But look, great story with Brian. I mean, thank you for sharing it, and thank you for Kathy, because she played a role here in crystallizing. It's binary. You figure it out or you don't.
Yeah, I think you guys probably owe her a royalty of some kind.
Yeah, that's we've used her name a number of times on this.
She's retired now, so
she's got time if she wants to come on.
She can have her own podcast.
Former teacher.
Well, she did say she would sell the shit out of this stuff. So, but she did. She also said that she's expensive.
She should always be closing. There's a salesperson for you.
Oh my God, Glenn Gherig, Glenn Ross reference.
But that's good. We always want people that believe in us to. If they want to use your talents, we can figure that out.
Absolutely, we've never had a problem with that. So, well, I guess we should wrap this up for today. Start thinking about the next podcast, please. If anybody out there has any comments when you get to see this up on YouTube, please comment. We really appreciate that. Any feedback on our podcast is welcome. And Brian, thank you very much for a great podcast.
Good job, Brian.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.